I'm going to turn this microphone, well, they have their own, but we're going to turn the microphone over to two highly accomplished gentlemen who are in the sports industry. Both of them have on the order of 25, 30 years of experience. John Collins, and both of them have children attending Clemson. John Collins, among other things, was the president of the Cleveland Browns, also was the #2 guy at the NHL. I'm a big hockey guy, so it really resonates. And he is given credit, although he shares it with the team, he's given credit for starting the Winter Experience, which is the January 1st game that has been spectacular, in terms of its popularity for the NHL. So we're delighted he's back for his second session, and he was instrumental in getting Chris Bevilacqua to come. His daughter is right here, and so he's proud of her. She's proud of him. It's a great deal. But he has worked for Nike. He has, an incredible resume, very insightful guy. So what we decided to do was we're not going to have a moderator. We're going to wing it and just hand the mics over to them, and they're just going to kind of chop it up for a little bit, and we're going to be the beneficiaries of their wisdom and knowledge and expertise. So that being said, this is totally unrehearsed, and we'll see how it goes.
How you doing, Chris?
Oh, it's great. Great to see you. Love it. JC and I go back, we've known each other now 30 years since we've been in this business together. So great to see you.
Usually when we get together is an adult beverage.
Or two, right?
So I'm going to go with the first question because I'm going to get you going.
All right.
So, Chris, obviously this is more, Kiki gave us the talking points, focus. It's about the students today. So I was thinking about what a disaster I was in college compared to you. I mean, you came out, you were pretty focused. You were a 2-time All-American wrestler at Penn State. So you had, all the traits of you were tough, you were disciplined, you were focused. So how did you make that transition from, basically being that elite athlete in a sport that probably had a shelf life, right? Like, it wasn't like you were necessarily, you could have been a professional wrestler, but.
I don't know about that. Maybe UFC. Yeah. So listen, when I graduated, I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do for my career. I thought I was going to keep wrestling into the Olympics, but I ended up hurting my shoulder. And so I didn't really have it planned out when I was graduating. But I just decided I just wanted to be in sports in some way, shape, or form. And, I've heard a little bit of this over the last few hours about the importance of networking and getting to know people. And so I had a friend of a friend who put me in touch with, somebody at NBC Sports, right, in 1987. That's how old I am. John, it's been actually almost 40 years for me. And I developed some relating and got, I guess you'd call it like a part-time job working at NBC Sports. That's kind of where I started my career. And I don't know what the hell I was doing. I just knew I wanted to be in sports. I learned, so I spent the next 5 to 8 years or so giving myself an MBA in sports, right? I learned how to produce programming working at NBC Sports, the production side of the business. Then I moved into programming. And then I left there and went to Major League Baseball. So I got into sales and marketing. I was selling corporate sponsorship. And then after a few years there, I went and I got an amazing opportunity working for Nike. And I was ultimately the global negotiations director. That's what we started to intersect when you were at the NFL. And I spent 4 or 5 years there working for Phil Knight. And in fact, one of the early deals I worked on was the Clemson Nike deal back in 1995, I think that was. And then had after 3 or 4 years of working at Nike, I had an idea that that Nike should be the first ever to do a 24-hour college sports channel, because we were working a lot in college sports, and I was going around the country buying up all these rights. We would get media rights to own games and events. And so I said to Phil Knight, why don't we create, it's the early stages of the 500 channel universe coming. This is 1999, digital cable, broadband. there ought to be a 24-hour college sports network. He said, well, we don't sell TV, we sell shoes and clothes. So I decided that's where I was going to start my adventure to be an entrepreneur. So I left Nike, spent about a year flying around the country with, presidents and commissioners and ADs, convincing them, I see Rob Temple here, convincing them that, ESPN can't own everything. You gotta create an alternative to ESPN. So let's do the first ever 24-hour college sports network. And that's what happened. We raised a bunch of money and eventually sold the business to CBS, the CBS Sports Network now. And, that transition from being an athlete, right, and then going to a school like Penn State, great educational experience, putting the whole package together, and that's what makes it, this is the only country in the world where you can get a world-class education and compete in athletics at the highest level. And that's what we should be trying to preserve for the next 100 years. So why don't you tell me about your journey when I want to ask you where, when you started and you got into sports, and I really want to hear how you went from you working at the leagues and then you got to On Location, which was your jump into entrepreneurship.
So I definitely want to hear your best film night story and who played you in the movie.
Movie. That would be Tom Cruise, I guess.
So for me, I came out of college and I got into advertising. And when advertising was an industry, it's not quite what it used to be, but it was a great training ground because you had a chance. I was there for 6 years. You had a chance to work on a lot of different companies, and see how they run and how they approach sponsorship, marketing, media, everything really. So I worked on accounts like McDonald's and Anheuser-Busch and Amtrak, and so you really got a sense of, different approaches and different ways of doing things. So, and because advertising was a business where you worked on an account for maybe 6 months and then you moved on to a different account, it was like, it was the benefit of actually moving from job to job without actually having to leave your job. So you had the equity of sticking with a company for 6 years. And then I got to sort of understand really how the sports world worked. I got the relationships there. And so my first move into sports was with NFL Films, which is the TV production company for the National Football League. For me, seemed like a natural transition. I had worked at an advertising agency with media and production and creative and marketing, and that's kind of like what NFL Films was for the National Football League. So it was a very easy move. And then from there, I was literally a kid in a candy store. It was the NFL, and there wasn't anything that I didn't want to do or find out or get involved with. And it was a time too, we had the benefit of really, sports probably during our careers transitioned from this, traditional families, the Maras and the Rooneys who, love sports, love their cities, and they own the teams, and they run them like American sportsmen, and then we had a number of people coming in who really were successful in other fields and then decided to get involved with sports, but were more demanding in terms of the return on the investment and the expansion of the business. And there were all these ancillary businesses that were popping up all over the place, whether it was media or technology or apparel. So it was really kind of a go time. I had the benefit of, getting involved in sports without actually moving to a club initially, because I'm not sure I would have been able to do the grind of working for a team in the ticket sales area. I don't think I ever would have.
So what was different about when you went to the Browns and you were the president of the Browns? What was different working at a club versus the league?
I think at the league, I had always appreciated the platform, right? The NFL was an amazing platform. It reached 120 million people every weekend. There was nothing, unfortunately, in American society where you could reach that many people. And so you could do big things. And that was sort of the way that the NFL embraced its brand and thought about it. But the reality is nobody ever roots for the shield, right? People root for teams, and that's really where the passion lies. And so when I had a chance to move to a team, it wasn't a path that I was looking for, but it kind of was presented to me. And I thought, why wouldn't I do this? Like, how could I not do this? what I did realize is, it's a very different business, and it's, you're in the frying pan, right, when you're with the team. And it is about wins and losses, and that's sort of that's what drives the passion of the fan base. And so it's completely a different sort of positioning. So.
Yeah, and then how did you, when you left and you started the New Year's Day game on NHL, you were at NHL 9 years it was? And then go from there to On Location.
So coming back to New York and ultimately working for the NHL was kind of like, I had learned all these great lessons at the NFL, and the NHL really was looking to get there, right? And so we had a strategy which was build national scale. The teams were, had great businesses at the local level. A lot of the teams had come to me and said, Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leafs, they were like, hey, we're killing it in our market. We need the league to start to generate some revenues. And that's really what Gary Bettman, the commissioner, wanted me to do. So our thing was to build scale, and ultimately that would translate into hopefully media dollars, but it would be hard. You can't do that overnight, right? You have contracts that have years to run. So we had a big digital strategy, but the most obvious thing that we did was the Winter Classic. And so that was, an opportunity that was presented to us by NBC. It was January 1st. It was in Buffalo. We were talking to some of the Buffalo guys. It was basically taking an indoor NHL game to an NFL outdoor stadium. And so, the greatest moment, well, there were two great moments. First moment was when I was leaving the hotel on January 1st and it was raining, and I'm going like, this isn't going to work. And just as we pull into the parking lot of Ralph Wilson Stadium, all of a sudden it starts snowing. And we're like, all right, now this will work. So that was one. Two was watching the two teams come out of the tunnel and look up, and there's 80,000 screaming fans, mostly probably Buffalo Bills fans, right? Same thing for an AFC championship game, but it was for a hockey game. And the guys were like, wow, right? It was just amazing. So that was, look, things work out, right? Sometimes you got to get lucky, right? And it just kind of works.
Always better to be lucky than smart, right?
That's the story of my life. So I think you asked me how I jumped out, and probably why I jumped out of the league, and you kind of did the same thing. So this is entrepreneurship. I think for me, staying out of league was really safe. I mean, it's, again, nobody boos the league. It's always, they say there's only, one team, two teams that win a Super Bowl or a Stanley Cup every year. It's the team that wins in the league office, right? So, so it was really kind of a great environment, but I had always kind of known, probably mostly because I spent so much time, those owners are tough, and they're tough about, who actually has the money and who's writing the checks, and it's really their business. And so even though you're running the business, it's not your business. And I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I just wanted to, I wanted to be an operator, right? And I really wanted to see if I had the ability to kind of build value. I thought I did. We negotiate a lot of big contracts for the owners, and you get a pat on the back. But I wanted to build something, and I was given the opportunity to do that with a move from the NHL to On Location, which was a private equity-backed company that was basically in partnership with the National Football League to take Super Bowl hospitality out of the league into this private equity-backed company and sort of take it up to the next level. And so that's kind of that's what we did. It was, in some respects, I wish I would have done it sooner, because having access to capital, we'll talk about it in Kiki's thing, having access to capital is a game changer, right? So instead of being in an organization where you're trying to hire one person to help drive this initiative that you want, you just go out and you buy a company, and then you integrate the company, and you can go that much faster and generate, that much more revenue. So that was an amazing trick that I said, man, I wish I would have known about this trick earlier. But the reality is I probably wouldn't have been ready for it, right? You need that operating experience. So that for me was the big move. You had a similar move, right?
When I was going around the country, I was earlier trying to start this 24-hour television network, like I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew about how the sports side worked, but I didn't know how to raise capital. And ultimately, once you raise the capital and you build an organization and you're building culture, right? And you're having to be thoughtful about the people that you're hiring and motivating, to set a vision and share a journey, like that's really hard. And then you go from that, and we had a business where we had to then go out and sell the business to cable operators. That's like thousands of meetings. And like, that's really hard to do. And I thought to myself, if I'd have known all of that before I decided to be an entrepreneur, I might never have done it. So, I mean, it was a wild ride for 5.5 years. How long was On Location from start to finish? Before you
4 years.
Four.
4 years.
That's
But they were dog years.
those are dog years. But I remember Steve Greenberg is a mutual friend. He's the head of sports practice at Allen and Company, investment banking firm, and he was my partner at CSTV. And I remember when we were starting the business, he said to me, Bevy, he goes, "You're going to be an entrepreneur, huh?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you're going to have some of the best days of your life, and you're going to have some of the worst days of your life, and sometimes it's going to be the same day." And he was dead right, because it was up and down, and you don't really know, where the end is going to, when the end is going to come. And in our case, we were battling against Disney and Fox, and then eventually against our own distributors and Comcast and others. And it's just like everyone was trying to kill us. And I come back to being the hard-headed wrestler. The one thing that, and I'll say to all the future entrepreneurs out here, like, what do you really have to be successful? And you have to have conviction. Number one, like whatever it is that you're selling, you got to be convinced in your own heart that there's going to be a great outcome and there's a need for this product or service. And then I think the most valuable thing I had was I never gave up. I never gave up. I would die on that hill before I gave up. And then in the end, I got a little lucky, because Les Moonves and CBS and Viacom were one company at the time, and then they split the company in two, and they took all the cable networks and they put them with Viacom, and CBS had no cable networks, and they had a big investment in the NCAA basketball tournament that they were losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year on, and they needed a high growth story. They needed a cable network story, and we were right there. And had that happened a year later, I don't know that we'd have been around. So you got to be a little lucky sometimes too.
So just to pick up on best day, worst day. In the 4 years, we went from 35 million in revenue to 700 million in revenue. So explosive growth. But the year before we actually had the opportunity to even sell the company, we had made 7 acquisitions and integrated 6 of them into the business. But the 7th one almost bankrupted us.
Well, that was the Prime Sport?
No, that was there was a production company that just killed us. So I'm presenting to the board, which was NFL guys, and then we had Carlisle, and we had Redbird, and we had Bruin. So we had 3 private equity companies in the NFL. And I'm asking for a capital call of $20 million, right? Which nobody expected that we were going to lose that kind of money and need 20 million just to keep the business going. And at the same time, that was like the left hand. And the right hand, I presented them the budget for the next season, assuming we got to 20 million, which was showing 55 million of EBITDA, right? So we were going to go from a negative 20 million in 1 year to a positive 55 million, right? $75 million swing. And I looked at the guy from Carlisle and I said, it was pretty sophisticated. Carlisle's a huge firm, pretty sophisticated. And I said, Randy, like, did you ever see that kind of a change in a year-to-year basis? And he said, no, never. But we executed. We got to 20 million. It wasn't easy. We had to ask the NFL to write a check, right? They were part of that. We executed the next year in Atlanta. I don't know if Mike Drake is still here, but Mike, Mike, Mike has some stories too about that. We executed the Super Bowl in Atlanta. We delivered on the 55 million of EBITDA, and that like was basically the moment that everybody in the industry started looking at us and said, I want to buy this, right? And that became the opportunity. That was similar to your
Yeah.
Les Moonves story.
Yeah. I mean, 4 years is pretty good, right, Kiki, to get in and out of a deal in 4 years. That's pretty good.
No, believe me, it was good. But, you know, there were listen, the other thing was, so there were a lot, the board was split, and two of the private equity companies wanted out. The other guy wanted to stay in, and the NFL had sort of recognized that I don't want to be with these capital partners anymore. It's time to kind of move on. These, you know, I can't have two guys wanting to stay in and one guy wanting to get out. So that was, you know, that was kind of the big move. But everybody was sort of saying, well, let's wait, because we had gone from Houston Super Bowl, Minnesota Super Bowl, which was like minus 20 degrees through the whole Super Bowl. It was a disaster. You know, it was really hard. To Atlanta, which was a great market, but not the best Super Bowl market. Great market. Really, downtown was integrated. We worked with Mike on a lot of that stuff. We introduced the concert series at State Farm where Mike was. It was amazing. But the next one was going to be Miami. And then after Miami, it was like Vegas and then LA. And so you could just imagine the business would be like a hockey stick going up. And we sort of said, the NFL kind of said, no, it's time to move on. Let's pick the right partner. And so the company closed on January 2nd, 2020. And I remember
For good timing, yeah.
Yeah, I know. And so the two guys, one of them was Jerry Cardinal, who you know.
All right, yeah.
So Jerry was like, I can't believe we're selling this company. You know, we should be waiting until Miami. And then COVID hits, and he turns to me and goes like, we look like geniuses, you know, because the whole industry shut.
Always better to be lucky than smart.
That's it.
Oh, questions.
Yep.
All right, yeah, fire away.
Hi, my name's Katie. I spoke earlier, but I'm a junior undergrad comm major here. So just thank you guys so much for coming. This is so exciting for me to see. Especially I'm from Long Island, so really exciting to see Islanders here. On top of that, I'm working for the Swamp Rapids right now in Greenville, and tonight's our opening night. So I want to know if you have any pieces of advice for someone who's never worked in hockey before. Can't say it's my strongest suit. I'm more of a baseball girl, but want to know if you guys have any pieces of advice for someone trying to break out in the industry.
Well, I got to give it to the hockey guy here.
Fortunately, actually, Chris is probably more of a hockey guy than I am. The reality is. No, look, I mean, I think it's just the fan experience, right? That's what it's all about. People want to come in. I mean, the great thing about sports is it's a unifying force, right? And you see it here at Clemson, right? Like it brings people together of all types. And at the end of the day, people can point to winning as the ultimate, you know, driver of the business and fan avidity and all that. But it's not always that, right? It's really about the emotional connection that you can create inside of that arena. And so that winner, you know, it's better if you win, but win or lose, you're there with friends and family and you're having a great time, and it's money well spent because you're competing for that bigger entertainment wallet, right? It's not, the choices are not whether I go to the hockey game or not. It's going to be, I go to the hockey game, I go to the movie, I can go out to dinner, I could take a trip to Vegas like Chris.
Bevy, media, the fracturing of media, right? And all the different places to consume content. One, maybe just speak freely on that just crazy landscape, but then maybe drill it down to if you're a conference at the collegiate level, you know, how do you want to package up your media rights if and when, let's say, over the next 3 to 5 years they come available? Give us a, you know, sort of a shot in the dark of maybe the best way to maximize revenue in the media packaging space, say at the conference level. But first, maybe just the fracturing of it and what it looks like today.
Yeah, sure. So great question. I used to think that back in the early 2000s, that was like the golden age of media. I guess now we're like in the platinum age. It's like an amazing transition. Like we're rapidly going from what used to be what I describe as mass media into hyper personalization, right? In sports and live entertainment is like the tip of the spear that's driving all this new technology and innovation. and the consumption habits have changed. But in the aggregate, more people are consuming media today in all different forms than ever in the history of the world. So it's an amazing time to be in the media business. And when you go from top down, the what is being consumed the most and what's the most visible and most valuable, I mean, I come back to live sports. And if you look at, I've been doing a lot of work on sort of what's happening on the college ecosystem over the last year and a half. And this is all related to the legislation that's going on, the SCORE Act, the SAFE Act. And, you were up here earlier talking about, all your revenue initiatives, which are great, but obviously the system has a real issue with the cost side, right? Unlike pro sports, right? Why does pro sports operate profitably, right? Well, it's called a salary cap. They have a cap on costs. So their revenue keeps going up and it gets more profitable over time. In college, the expenses keep going up and the revenue is not keeping up with it. So if I were the king for the day and I could redesign the whole system, right, you would try to do what the leagues have done so well, right? Like what the NFL has done and the NBA and NHL. You would unify the intellectual property rights that you have as one, right? Which is in the NFL, when you want to buy, you sell 276 games, you can only buy them from one guy, Roger Goodell, and they set the schedule, and so they have the commercial power, right, and they're protected by legislation, the Sports Broadcasting Act, that allows them to do that without running afoul of antitrust laws. In college, you can't do that, right? You have 12 different sellers, 10 conferences, the NCAA, the CFP. So it has a depressing effect on the ability to monetize your most important asset, which are your media rights. So the first thing I would do is change all that. And then you'd be, the big leap will be, and this is what the leagues have done so effectively, is they figured out how to move from just the traditional media companies who can only do so much in the way of distribution and monetization through the wholesale model, right? You have a network, you go to a cable operator, you sell it, and then they pay you a lot of money, and then they resell it to the end customer. Well, that's all shrinking. And now direct to consumer, where you got to get one customer at a time, is now growing. And so what the leagues have been able to do is the jujitsu move from traditional media only to now bringing in the streamers. And the streamers have completely different business models, like Amazon and Netflix and Hulu, where they're selling different products. Apple selling devices, right? Amazon selling household goods. I mean, so getting that intellectual property out of the traditional bundle into the direct-to-consumer world is going to be key in unlocking all that revenue potential. And then also just serving the end user, because he or she wants to get what they want, where they want it, when they want it in real time. And that getting rid of all the friction and the customer experience is going to be a key to really maximizing all that. I don't know, John, you probably have a lot to add to that.
No, I don't actually. The only thing I do think is interesting, though, that Mike and I've talked about and Hal talked about, and is how to ultimately harness all the avidity that's like in this room and throughout the entire Clemson community, which I know is what you're looking to do, Mike. Like there are traditional revenue streams like media and sponsorship and apparel, but that avidity and what people will do because they just love, Clemson, right? And where does that go? And we've seen it, we were kidding around about the MBNA, Clemson affinity credit cards. But even in Florida, the Florida Panthers, Vinny Viola, who's a very sophisticated financial guy, did Virtue, which runs the entire high volume trading impact for the New York Stock Exchange, has come up with a way to link all the things that you do with the Florida Panthers inside their arena and then outside their arena to some sort of monetary product for the Panthers, which to me is an interesting opportunity. And I know Mike, if there's anybody who can do it, Mike Drake can do it.
Hi, my name is Kimberly. I'm from Garden City, New York, and I'm also a huge Islanders fan. For you, Mr. Collins, I have to ask, what has been the most rewarding part of your career working for the Islanders?
So I think it's still to come. And I think what it is we've just kind of reset the whole organization. So we had a legendary president and general manager in Lou Lamoriello, Hall of Famer, took the team to 2 consecutive Eastern Conference Finals. Amazing guy. Transition to Matthew Darsh, who's now the new GM, who came from Tampa Bay Lightning and has had a long history in the sport. And actually just announced a new club president, Kelly Cheeseman, who's coming from AEG, one of the big holding companies, entertainment companies, and the LA Kings. The idea is really to not only win on the ice and get back to that championship heritage, but also to connect with the New York and Long Island community in a way that frankly hasn't happened since the Dynasty team, which doesn't look like you were alive for the Dynasty days. So that would be it. I think it's an exciting time. The new arena, the renovation of the racetrack, the Belmont Park Village retail location. It's Scott Malkin, who's the principal owner, likes to say it took us 10 years to get to this moment, but now we're on the launch pad. And so more to come.
John and Chris, thank you so much.